Well, I've just got to say, I think I'm a little bit out of my depth here because I'm with the greatest Greek writer, following on from Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, and then Taki, Taki Theodoracopulos. I can't tell you what a pleasure it is, Taki, and thank you so much for your time. And I also just want to say thank you while I've got the chance for all that you've done for me over the years
It's been
to
nothing.
give me a
No,
bit of
no.
exposure.
Enough about Taki. Let's
Taki,
get on
no,
with it.
you've been absolutely wonderful, Taki. But I also think, and I'm going to say this because it's true, I don't think there's another writer alive who has written for one publication for 47 years, which is uh, which is what you did for the Spectator, and that's just an achievement that I don't know. There's nobody else around that I can think of who can match that.
Well, the funny thing is, I never missed a single week in 47 years. And the only time they killed one column, the editor wasn't there. And the assistant editor got scared because I called a certain person a pedo pimp. And this man turned out to be Jeffrey Epstein. But I wrote this a long time before I knew he was a pimp and I knew he was blackmailing people. I never met him, but I knew all about him. And it's ironic that the only column that was ever spiked by the Spectator in 47 years was when I called them that, and they got too scared. The lawyers typically get scared. But, such are the joys of libel laws in England.
That's fascinating, Tucky. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But Tucky, just can we just go? Can you talk us through the editors that you worked with over
Well,
the years?
yeah, I had about five owners, starting with Henry Keswick, then Algie Clough, then some Australian, then finally the Barclay brothers. I got along with all of them, but I had seven editors. First, Alexander Chancellor, then Charles Moore, now Lord Moore. Then he was Dominic Lawson. Then he came Frank Johnson, then Boris Johnson, then what's his
President
name?
Nelson.
No, no, before he was a telegraph boy. And then, of course, Fraser Nelson. And I never had a single problem with a single editor in 47 years. The first call that Dominic Lawson got when he became editor was because he was the first Jewish editor we had. He had a call from the Israeli ambassador who said, "Congratulations, you're the first Jewish journalist to head the Spectator. The first thing you have to do is get rid of Taki." And Dominic said, "No, I won't. He's a brilliant columnist." And of course, I had my problems with Conrad Black, who I forgot to mention, who was a major owner of the Spectator and the Telegraph. And Conrad was very angry with me because I had written about I'm pro-Palestinian because I've been to those camps. I covered the Yom Kippur War, but I was there in '69 and saw four generations of refugees in camps. So, of course, although I was very pro-Israeli when I was young, I changed my mind because you cannot build a country upon the misery of other people. Uh, so of course, the Israeli ambassador was, but Dominic never fired me, never even suggested it. And then, then I worked for 5 years as a columnist in the Sunday Times at the same time, and of course Esquire, National Review, and all the Americans. And then I started a magazine of my own, the American Conservative with Pat Buchanan. So it's been a long ride and it's been fun. And I have a book out now called The Last Alpha Male, which I'm dying to send to you because it's fun. And
Let's
you
let's
know,
just talk a little bit about your book, Tucky, The Last
yeah,
Alpha Male. Is it a biography, autobiography?
yes, it's a biography. It's about my father, myself, the war, the civil war in Greece. But it has a funny beginning, which in reality, I'll tell you what happened. I was asleep in London at 5:30 in the morning when I got a telephone call from a very well-known journalist, female, who had had an accident in a Greek island and she couldn't communicate with the Greeks. So she called me And she started like this: Taki, my name is so and so. And my answer was at 5:30 in the morning, have we made love? And she said, oh, no, no. I said, why not? She said, well, I'm 45 years old. So I said, well, hang up the telephone at once. That's how the book starts. In reality, I did speak with the Greeks, and of course, I fixed everything. But I start like that because it's a good lesson. It shows me to be a real SHIT, which I hope I'm not, but I had a good time doing it. And she wrote about it in the Telegraph, saying how helpful I was. But of course, I changed it. And the rest of the book is about my father and how um, it was very funny this week, coming up next week in the Taki Mag. When I was 20 years old, I had no money, of course. My father was a very rich ship owner and industrialist, and I borrowed some money. I was going out with the wife of Tyrone Power, Linda Christian, and she had mistaken me for my father. She thought I was very rich. So I borrowed money from a gangster, 100% interest, and of course I fled to Europe. He followed me, found my father, told him about it. He said he's a 20-year-old boy. We'd hate to disfigure him. So my father paid, and my punishment was I was sent to the Sudan. Now, a slaughterhouse. But then the punishment was like being invited to spend the night with Lily James and Keira Knightley. It was heaven. There was a palace, the presidential palace. Across was the Grand Hotel. I had a driver called Zaki and a personal butler called Abdu. The southern Christians got along with the northern Muslims. The place
Sorry,
was just,
Taki, were you in Khartoum?
yes, my father had the biggest factory in Africa, 5,000 workers, textile factory. And my only job was General President Aboud would come around sometimes, and I would give him a little gift. That was my only job. The rest of the time, I played tennis with Gottfried von Crabbe, three-time Wimbledon finalist. Alfred Krupp was building a bridge from Khartoum North to Omdurman. It was a wonderful life. And then some descendant of the Mahdi decided that Sudan should change, and they just revolted. They took over, they overthrew Aboud. They came after me. My father was trying to get me out. I took a boat up the Nile to Egypt. And years later, on my way to Kenya, I don't shoot, I photograph animals. I was going down with the Radzivills, and it had stopped in Khartoum, and I went out just to see our old factory, which had 5,000 workers in an air conditioned, and it was they had burned it down. So I just wrote about it this week. We had 5,000 workers who were paid not European wages, but better Sudanese. And all my father did was offer jobs, and there were good jobs. And suddenly they burned everything down, and now it's a slaughterhouse. And of course, was it our fault that we went there and provided jobs? Anyway, it's a tragedy, and I really feel sad because Sudan was a wonderful nation. The Sudanese people were very nice, and now apparently you can photograph the corpses can be seen from space. They're piled up. The Janjaweed. It's just such a tragedy, and we here in America go around talking about racism in universities. They forgot what Africans are doing to each other.
It's a pity Aidan didn't join us for this talk because he's been spending quite a lot of time in Juba,
Yes,
and
I used
Aidan
to go
knows a
to
lot
Juba
about.
because that's where we used to take the demuria, as they call it, the cloth. I used to go down to Juba, exactly. It was such a wonderful place. In fact, I won the Sudan Open in 1961, and it's my only great victory. I still have the trophy, but I'm now 89 years old. It's heartbreaking what Africans are doing to Africans, and we're getting the blame for it. I remember one of the libel laws that I lost was when Christopher Hitchens, a lefty, had made fun of Smith, the Prime Minister of Rhodesia. He had made fun of him because of his scars. And I wrote an article saying, "You're making fun of a man who got his scars fighting for Britain." And of course, I called him all sorts of names. Of course, he won the libel case. It's unbelievable what we do to ourselves, against ourselves, when we have such monstrous crimes taking place.
Taki, yeah, I think we might go down in history as the first civilization that actually financed our own destruction.
Yes, definitely. We financed it. It's called Cupio di Soldi. Yes, we yearn for our destruction. Yes.
Taki, we got so much that I want to cover, but I just want you to go back to the beginning, just briefly, your childhood and where you grew up, just a little bit about your early history, your
Very
parents
quickly, I
growing
was
up in
born in
Greece.
Athens in 1936. My father was an industrialist. My mother was Spartan. From a long, long line of Spartans, all her family were always Spartans. And now the village where she was born, the town, is named after my grandfather, the museum. Our house is a museum. And of course, my first memory was 1940, the sirens blowing, my mother crying, my father going off to the front, where we beat the Italians. We drove them back into Albania. We took Gorizia and Tepeleni. Those were glory. And of course, I grew up thinking that military victories and military glory was the acme of life. But then the Germans came, and then, of course, it was the communist revolution. My father fought in that. They burned our factories. My father went to America and bought ships and became a ship owner. And then I went to America, was educated there. And then I went on the tennis circuit, where a South African called Cliff Drysdale has written the
Yes,
one great book called A Long Line of Summers. People forget that in those days, tennis was an elite sport, so it was played in country clubs, except for the four majors, Wimbledon, Roland Garros, and
yeah.
Forest Hill. So in the country clubs, apart from the tennis, there are girls. So all we did was play tennis and chase girls. It was a wonderful life. Nobody had masseurs or trainers or motivators or cooks. We traveled together. The best, like Roy Emerson, was my great buddy. He won Wimbledon twice, 64 and 65. We were great. Everybody got along. We played tennis. I was one of the worst on the circuit. But I'll tell you one thing. I used to practice all day long with Althea Gibson, who won Wimbledon 57. She was the first black woman to win Wimbledon and the national in America. She and I played together, and we were about the same. And I was the worst player on the circuit. So when today they're talking about women being able to beat men, it's a joke. I was the worst man on the circuit, and we never played a match, obviously, because I was too embarrassed to try hard, because that's how the mentality was in those days. We got along, we hit forehand to forehand, backhand to backhand. Althea and I were friends. And I was, I was probably among the top five women players. And the funny thing is, I played when I was at the University of Virginia. I played a left-hander called Dick Raskin. I beat him on clay. He killed me on cement, but I lost to a woman. He transited or something. He's a woman now, Renee Richards, and she's quite famous. She's 92 now. I'm 89. And I wrote an article recently, Chronicle, saying how I lost to a woman, and she was good as a woman. I mean, she was the top 20, and he was nothing. He was like me as a man. So it just goes to show. But of course, if you write anything like this today here in America, you'll be called a male chauvinist pig, and people will just bury you. That's the mentality. But it was a wonderful life playing tennis. And then, of course, I started working for a top Greek newspaper. The trouble was in Greece back then, the journalists didn't speak any foreign language. So when there was a crisis like I covered the Yom Kippur War or the 67 War, uh, you had to file in English because the Israelis wouldn't let you file anything you wanted. So I became probably the most sought after Greek in Greece because of I can speak French and write in English and Greek. So I got my break there. And then eventually I drifted to England, and Alexander Chancellor gave me a column in 1977, and that was it.
Okay, just going back to tennis, I've just been watching old Boris Becker
Yeah.
talking about his sort of life story, going to prison, and he comes across such a very sincere guy. I've really taken a shine to him as a
Yeah.
person, talking very frankly about his mistakes in life. And did you have anything to do with
I never
Boris?
met him, but one day I was hitting balls at the Queen's Club, and I was wearing a German, a shirt with a German sign here. He was in the next court. He came over. He could not have been more polite. He said to me, "Have you been to this club?" I said, "No, it's a shirt that I bought somewhere." He could not have been nicer. And don't forget, he's the youngest to ever win Wimbledon. He won it at 17. And of course, the money's so big now that he got into trouble. But I thought Wimbledon was very cowardly to not to invite him to comment anymore because he's a nice boy. He's got woman trouble, but we all do. Although I've been happily married for 55 years, and I know he's a good boy and he was a hell of a player because he was the first one. You know what they've done in the reason I've had to say this to you, my dear Hannes, about tennis. In those days, tennis was great when we had wooden rackets because a weak player who was smart could beat a top player with guile and touch and intelligence. Because if you hit the ball very hard with wooden rackets and the gut we had then, the ball went out. If you didn't hit it hard enough, it went to the net. Today, the game is completely changed. It's just hit, hit, hit. There's no more touch. You see some people trying drop shots. That's in the old days. I remember people like Beppe Merlo who had no backhand. He just pushed the ball up high. Oh, Herbie Flam, who won the French in 1961, they were so smart that you could do anything. So typically, the Americans, because of technology, they've changed the game. Now you just hit the covers of the ball goes in because of the technology. It's not the same game because then the reason why people play tennis today is because anybody can hit the ball in. In those days, it was almost very difficult to hit the ball in. It changed the game completely. For me, Lou Hode was the greatest. I toured with Abe Siegel, who was South African. We had so much fun. I remember in Paris, he's waiting to play the quarterfinals to show you how wonderful life was. And they announced over the loudspeaker, 20,000 people waiting, Abbé Segal, Court Central, Abbé Segal, Court Central. He's sitting in the locker room. His name is Abe Siegel. He's a South African. He doesn't understand Abbé Segal. And he gets disqualified. I was traveling with him. He made me laugh. He's no longer with us. But Abe was so funny. He says, "How am I supposed to understand?"
Taki, it's funny you mentioned Lou Hode
Yeah.
because he came to my hometown on Tali, which was still Southern Rhodesia then. Him, Roy Emerson, I think.
Or
Uh,
maybe, yeah.
in those days, they used to do
Mal
these.
Anderson, Roy Emerson, yeah. And
Yeah,
Lou
and
was great
they
buddies.
came to Umtali, the
Yeah.
little town where I grew up in Rhodesia.
Sure.
I'll never forget the whole town turned out to watch those guys playing. And I think Bob Hewitt
Bob
was
Hewitt
also
was a great Australian, became a South African. And Lou Hode today, if he was playing with today's modern equipment, he would be unplayable. He used to
really.
roll. He used to roll his backhand with his wrist. Nobody could do that with with a wooden racket. He used to hit the cover off the ball. And I'll never forget, he said to me once in the French, "I've never hit a defensive shot in my life. Maybe I should learn." He was fantastic, and he died so young. And I
Gee,
remember when he fell in love with Jenny, he couldn't play tennis. He lost in the first round. He
uh,
was a wonderful man.
but Taki, it's funny what you say about tennis and wood and the new equipment. The same things happened to golf
Sure.
with the metal drivers and stuff. Hitting a wooden driver was took a lot of skill.
Took a lot of
And
skill,
now with these
sure.
metal drivers, it's changed the game. And I'm not sure
Completely.
it's changed it for the better, but there were guys out there that really weren't making it until the metal drivers came along, and
Yeah.
then suddenly they could compete. So technology has changed golf as well in a big way.
Well, it's changed golf. It changed tennis terribly, I think, for the worse, because tennis was such a subtle game, and to see, great. The Italians knew how to spin the ball and lob and run everything down. Now it's just hit, 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 and well, look at. I don't mind it in track and field because, of course, running on cinders. was different. I remember my father, who ran in the 36 Olympics and the 32 Olympics. In the 32 Olympics, he was on the relay team, Greece. My uncle came in sixth in the hurdles, 400-meter hurdles in Los Angeles in 1932. He told me that no, my uncle told me my father used to put his cigarette out on the cinders, dig a hole before running. I said, what? They were real amateurs. He'd put the cigarette out and they'd tell him, don't put it out in the hole you're digging. It brings bad luck. It was wonderful. Now it's, well, I don't mind that because, of course, it's better for the runners and the records fall and all that. But in tennis and in golf, it's like putting steel in boxing gloves. It gives you, obviously, it changes the sport completely. And of course, I haven't done it in boxing, but in tennis is not the same game, nor is golf.
No, technology's definitely changed it, and the money is just absolutely outrageous.
Outrageous, outrageous. I mean, those guys won Wimbledon twice in a row, and they got 80 quid. I took Lou
Yeah,
Holt to the Milroy after he won the second one. Nobody knew who he was. Well, more power to them, but it's not the same because athletes, with an entourage, Djokovic has an entourage of 20. He travels with 20 people on a private jet. I just feel, in a way, I feel good that I never made it in tennis because I'd be a little bit bitter. If I had won Wimbledon and I just wrote my obituary for the Spectator. It's a joke obituary. I said I died in bed with Ava Gardner, 102 years old. I was born in abject poverty, and I was found outside of an Athenian brothel. And I won Wimbledon in 56 and 55, 56 and 57. That's when Lou won it. If I had won Wimbledon and got 80 pounds and saw what they're doing, 80 million pounds today, I'd be a bit bitter. So in a way, I'm glad I didn't sacrifice anything. I played tennis for fun because and Roy Emerson, who I still see in Gstaad, I'm in Gstaad in the winter, he comes and gives some lessons. He couldn't be nicer. He's exactly my age. We're both 89. He won Wimbledon twice, 64 and 65. He's not bitter at all. And, he doesn't drink anymore. We used to drink heavily in those days. And he had
Taki,
a double.
who's just turned 90
No,
is
89.
Gary Player.
Oh, Gary Player. Yes, he turned 90. Great player.
Yeah, and he stuck around for long enough to do well enough, but he'll tell you. And I've got to say, I spent a few days with Gary Player, and what a treat that was. He's actually just been doing a talk in America. He's played golf with I think every president since Eisenhower,
Since Eisenhower.
and he's got this incredible memory. He can remember everything about all these people and stuff. Just the most amazing guy. But he'll tell you, what they were playing for in those days when he won the British Open and the
Sure.
Masters and stuff.
He won
It
the
was a nice paycheck, but they weren't getting rich. And that's actually one of the reasons why I think the game was so cutthroat competitive in those days, because there wasn't that much money. Now you can be 200 in the world,
Oh, you'll make
and
money.
you're probably a millionaire.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And the trouble in tennis is that if you're outside the, let's say, 250, it's very difficult to live because in those days we got expenses. In other words, I stayed, being a very low player, I stayed with families that put you up in families. The good ones were given, let's say, maybe $400 under the table to play a tournament. But today, and you had a ticket, they gave you a ticket. Today, they buy their own tickets, they have to pay for their own hotels. And if you don't make it in the first round, so the top 500 live well. But after that, nothing. You see them changing all the time. Then they become, there are pros already. They go to teach them because you can't. It's a very tough life unless you're in the top 500.
Okay, let's go from tennis to a subject you know a lot about, which is woman.
Yeah.
Taki, I want to ask you, who are your eyes, the beautiful woman, the top five most beautiful women that came across your radar?
Well, I went out when I was very young. I went out with Joan Collins, and they have her picture and me when I was 20. She's 3 years older than me. We have a picture at the Spectator hanging, Joan and I in Morocco in 1957. I was not yet 20. I went out with Brigitte Bardot, who's a very nice girl, and Linda Christian and Janet Leigh. I went out with her in the south of France. She was very pretty and very nice, sort of ill at ease. She was shy, and she's exactly the way she was in Psycho, in real life. And Janet, she was sort of unhappy being married to Tony Curtis. Uh, but I guess the prettiest I've ever seen. I went to play Davis Cup in 1964. We went to Spain, and the first openly gay bullfighter came to watch us practice. Spain wiped us out with Manolo Santana, 5-0. Anyway, the Davis Cup hadn't started, and Chamaco, who's first open bullfighter, came with his entourage. We were hitting balls, and he said to me in English, "Do you want to go to the Flamingos tonight?" I said, "Sure." So the captain of the Greek team said, "You're not going anywhere." I said, "I want to go. Bullfighter, I want to, I'd seen the Barefoot Contessa and all those films." So anyway, I went, and Ava Gardner was there. She was drunk. And I remember she asked me, she thought I was Spanish because I'm dark. She asked me, "Puto, are you homo?" I said, "No, no, no, Miss Gardner." I said, "Jugador de tenis. I'm a tennis player." And she said, "Oh, you must be puto then. You have to be a homo." That's the only time. I thought she was the most beautiful ever.
Eva Gardner. You know,
Yeah.
Taki, the closest my Brigitte Bardot story is Gunther Sachs came
Yes.
hunting in
Yes.
Mozambique
Sure.
back in the 70s. And that's where I used to go as a kid
Mm-hmm.
to go and hunt. Or I used to spend time with the hunters in southern Mozambique, chaps by the name of Ken Fubbs and Wally Johnson. And that's where I sort of really got the taste for wanting to be a hunter at some stage of my life. But he had just been on safari and he'd left some photographs of Brigitte Bardot, scantily clad. And I
Yeah.
was about 14 or 15 when old Ken Fubbs showed me these photographs. Jesus. I, just blew me away. I'll never forget. That was I looked
And
at
I'll tell
this
you
and
something
thought,
else. Brigitte Bardot was on our side politically. The rest of them never said anything, but Brigitte was very conservative in her politics. I went out with her in 68, 69, and she was very right wing. And she had her sister, Mijanou, was even more attractive.
really.
Yeah.
Yes, I know.
Not,
She got into trouble at some stage for being too pro anti-immigrant, and that was a long
yeah,
time ago.
exactly. Well, exactly. Most people, as you know, are very anti-open borders. But the moment they say anything, these monsters of the media, they'll immediately jump and call you racist just because you say, "I'm sorry, but I like to be with my own people a little bit." New York, they just elected Mamdani, who's a socialist. Trump calls him a communist. There's no more communists in the world. They're socialists. But he won because the place is full of immigrants, recent immigrants. In the old days, immigrants came, learned the language, and became Italian Americans or Greek Americans, Polish Americans. Now they keep their culture. They demand that we learn their language. And of course, they voted in Mamdani, who's not a bad person. He's 34 years old. He comes from Uganda. He's white, bearded. All the rich Jews are going to move to Florida or Texas with their business. That's the fate of the world.
I was actually just going to ask you what you make of that, but you're right, Tucky. This is what's happening. It's a demographic thing, and the yeah those ethnic groups are breeding faster
Sure.
than 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 our lot are. We not
Or
our
much more
population is
faster. They
imploding.
all have. They're poor. They're on welfare, and they have 8 to 10 children. Americans, local white Americans have two, maybe three maximum, or most likely one. So the writing is on the wall, and that's how it is.
Unfortunately, same thing's happening in Africa, Turkey.
Absolutely.
The poorer these people get, the more children they have.
Sure.
It's just astonishing, and the demographics are terrifying. I mean, Kenya is, I think, 50, 60 million people now.
Can you imagine?
Tanzania also over 60 million. There's
Oh
no
my.
ways any economy can grow fast enough
No,
to.
no, no way. No. My dear Hannes, you know Africa very well. A friend of mine, who the editor, Paul Godfrey, the editor of Chronicles magazine, I just wrote my goodbye column because after 25 years, he wrote an article which I quote about the tribal. When Aristotle said that the best form of government is to elect a ruler and then the ruler to be ruled by those who elected him eventually. In other words, changing. And I think that was the system, the tribal system in Africa, long before the do-gooders went there. But we changed all that. I once went to give a speech in Pennsylvania at a university, and I talked about the Sykes-Picot when they split Palestine. And I wrote that Sykes was English, being English and obsessed with honors, was trying to think if Picot came from a good family or not. And Picot was thinking, is this guy homosexual or not? So they just split Palestine in the middle. They gave half to Jewish people, the other half, without taking into account that the people who were there, you could have done it differently, but we made those mistakes, and that's what's happening. Anyway, Paul Gottfried's article is very interesting because if we had stayed, what's happening in Nigeria today is terrible. What's happening in Sudan, it's terrible, terrible, and and suddenly we're getting blamed for what? They're going to blame imperialism for that?
Taki, what's so disappointing is there's been nobody until Trump who stood up for the Christians. I mean,
Sure.
the Pope, these popes never say anything.
How funny. I wrote about the Pope yesterday. He's sitting there talking about women's rights. They're killing Christians, and he's saying nothing. If the Pope doesn't answer, can charge the same thing. They're phony. They're so busy. Terrible.
You're right. Charles, head of the Anglican Church, archbishops of Canterbury, I don't think one of them said anything about Christianity for about 40 years.
40 years, and now it's a woman.
Telling us how wonderful every other religion is.
Yeah.
That's where Trump is a breath of fresh air. And then he's saying, to hell with us. Somebody's got to look after the Christians too. And that's something that caught my attention with Bashar Assad. He was one of the last secular leaders in the Middle East, where there was actually a Christian population that was protected. And in that
the Alawites protected. And look what's happening now. They're going after the Alawites. Nobody says a word. I mean, I was very pro-Assad, funny enough. But, the media is really the devil in there. The media always will side against Christianity, against any kind of white power, against everything. It's funny, Hans, you and I are writers, and we know what we're up against. I mean, I had more people writing. That's why I start the book the way I do. In other words, you're going to call me a bad guy anyway. I'll give you a reason. It's of course I didn't hang up on her, and of course I did. But I start like that to give him the finger. I don't care, At my age, I don't care, and there's nothing they can do to me anymore. But throughout those 47 years that you very kindly talked about, you should see the resentment. I could see it whenever we gave parties, whenever you could see the journalists looking to find something to write very negatively about, because I was conservative. It's a major crime.
Okay, I don't know if you want to talk about it, but how it ended with
yes, I'll talk about it. I'll talk about it. Andrew Neil came to my house in 2007 or 2008, and he brought 3 women with him. I didn't know. I met them. One of them, called Lisa Hilton, said to me, she produced an article of mine, because I write love letters. I like to, and I've written a column about it. one time these two girls who were rooming together, one of them said to the other, I can't stand that man, Taki. And she said, I can't stand him either, but he does write beautiful letters. Let me see yours. It was the same one. Anyway, so she asked me twice, can you send me? I said, sure. She had a roommate called Phoebe Vella, very nice girl. She's black. 13 years later, because I made fun of Me Too, she came up with the idea that I had gone and tried to get to bed with her. I never understood why she didn't accuse me of rape. She said attempted rape. I never went to her room for two reasons. One, she wasn't my type and I wasn't hers. B, she had a roommate called Phoebe Vella. Believe it or not, Phoebe Vella and Andrew Neil were not allowed to give evidence. Now, this is in a Swiss court. They were not allowed because her roommate would have said, I'm sorry, but I don't sleep that deeply. If Taki had come in, I would have seen him. They were in my chalet. She wrote me a very thank you letter. That was ignored. I didn't see her 14 years or 13 years later. She came up with this, and she got a man called Andrew Roberts, who was her lover, to write a letter saying he's never seen such injuries on a person. I lost the case in front of a small town Swiss judge. I appealed in front of three women. I lost that too. Now I'm in the Superior Court. I just found it amazing that the Spectator, which after 47 years, they said we're doing it to protect you because you'll be open because you lost the case. But at the same time, I don't understand how any court refuses witnesses because she had a roommate. And Andrew Neil, who brought her, was very willing to go to Switzerland and say, I took her there and I brought her back to London. She never said a word. And of course, her roommate. But that's how it goes. I thought I was treated shabbily, but my dear Hannes, you know, from your home country, being bitter doesn't help. You know, it was a strange way to finish. They're excerpting the book. They said in late November. I don't know if they will or not, but you know, they said they're trying to protect me, some kind of protection. Anyway, that's it. That's my side of the story. Anyway,
a guy that I followed so closely and was so impressed with as editor of the Spectator was Boris Johnson. I just thought he brought that magazine alive, and
of course he did.
I was fascinated by the guy and so excited when he went into politics.
Sure.
But what a disappointment. Somehow
you know why? My dear Aiden, my dear Hannes, he was great as an editor. He protected me when Conrad wanted to get rid of me because first of all, he understood French. There was a big scandal in the embassy when the French ambassador said, and I speak perfect French, Parlons de ce pays emmerdant. That means let's speak of that annoying country. Emmerdant means annoying. It has nothing to do because there's four letters like merde, which means shit. Nothing to do. It was, of course, printed the next day in all the papers that he called it that shitty little country. The words are two completely different. So, of course, it stuck. Boris, who speaks French, obviously knew the difference. He was a great editor. When Conrad wanted me to apologize for being pro-Palestinian and writing this article saying he never said it, he never called it a shitty little country. No ambassador would do that. He said, pays emmerdant. It means annoying country. Israel is an annoying country. There's nothing anti-Semitic about that. So, but once Boris protected me, said Taki is untouchable. Once he became prime minister, suddenly it's like, he wanted net zero and he started net zero, the middle class, lower middle class people have to buy new. It's a joke. What else is net zero?
He went and locked England down for 2 years because over that bloody bullshit about COVID.
Opened up the borders to have cheap labor.
Yeah, more people came in during his tenure sure. But also, what really got my attention? That was also the time when these mobs were tearing down statues in England.
Sure.
That one in Bristol, I can't remember all
in
the
Bristol,
details.
Yeah.
And I
Of
thought,
course,
jeepers, surely Johnson will say something. He didn't say a word. They were chucking these statues into the rivers,
into
and
the river. They put crap all over, and he didn't say a word. That's what I think it happens to many people. Once they gain power, he wants to stay in power, and he starts to appease the left. The left is never happy unless
well,
they're in power.
he couldn't
So,
have. He had a chance to really become. He could have been
of
a
course,
great, but it took balls
absolutely, I couldn't
that he
agree
didn't
with you
have.
more.
And then he goes off to Ukraine and tells Zelensky to carry on with the war. I don't know what the hell he was playing at there.
I don't know. He wants to be Churchill, but Zelensky, people forget that Ukraine, Stalin killed 5 million, and they continue to fight like hell against the Germans. The Ukrainians, I don't care what they say now, Ukrainians were loyal Russians. It's part of Russia. It's like saying suddenly Wales or Scotland is not part of the UK. It's like saying California. We stole California from the Mexicans. We stole New Mexico, Arizona. I mean, it's American now. Ukraine was always part of Russia. When Napoleon attacked in 1812, he thought that the army could live off the land because the peasants, who were slaves, would revolt. They burned their own houses, the slaves, because the Russians first and slaves second. People forget that. No, so I'm not so sure that I'm not for Zelensky, and I mean, I've just wanted peace there because of those poor Russians, those poor Ukrainians getting killed. It's terrible, and I think Trump is doing the right thing. But Zelensky's. We told them we weren't going to move an inch to Gorbachev. Baker, the foreign and the American Secretary of State, told him not 1 inch when Gorbachev gave up power. What have we done? We're 29 NATO nations riding the vulva of Putin. So I can see his point. Of course, you can't say a word here in America and England pro Putin. You're immediately a Nazi. So it's the same old story.
I was hoping that because Trump has tried to
Yeah,
mend fences with Putin, but he seems to have walked away. What do you make of Putin and the way
I
that?
wish I could tell you. I wish I could enlighten you on that one. I don't know what game Trump is playing. He did the right thing. I don't understand why Putin took him, didn't take him up, because Trump wants peace there and he likes Putin. And I'm not so sure that Putin is such a monster that they make him out to be in the press. I mean, tell me the last democratically elected man. It was Yeltsin, this drunken buffoon, a nice man whose daughter has $5 billion. I don't know where she got it from. So Russia, it's the biggest country in the world, has always been led by strong men. I wish I could say something that's worth saying, but I don't know what game they're playing. I think Putin thinks eventually that Ukraine will give up, but Ukraine, as long as we keep pushing them and giving them arms, will not. Give him Donetsk and finish. That's it. If he has Donetsk, he'll stop fighting. Which is part Russian. I would say it's 60% Russian anyway, the population. So
Taki, what has become clear to me is the Russian military is not.
useless.
It doesn't look like it's
No,
up to much. I don't care
no,
what anybody
they're
says, but
using
4 years
World
later,
War II tactics. World War II tactics don't work anymore. They're learning now with those things, whatever you call them. But
drones.
the army. The Russians have always fought. First World War tactics. The Battle of Kursk was tank against tank, bumping each other. It's a big country. It's the richest country in the world in minerals and the poorest country in the world. I don't know. It's tragic.
Hell of a shame. Taki, it's a place you spend a lot of time. Your daughter lives there, I think. What is the future of the UK? How do you?
No, she lives in Vienna.
She lives in
She's
Vienna, but
yeah,
you
she lives
spend
in
you
Vienna
spend a lot
now.
of time in England.
I don't know what the future of the UK is because of immigration. Because of, do you believe it? There'll be less white people by the year 2050 in the London area. Now, in the big cities, the whites will be a minority. It's an island. I don't know how it can survive, but it will. I guess everybody survives, but it's very tough the way it's going. You saw those riots. If you're a white, what they call, if you're a white man waving an English flag, you get arrested. If you're a Muslim screaming down with so and so, you'll be let go. Two tier, two tier policing. That's they'll learn. Once they're out of power, they'll regret it, but it'll be too late for the people. I
Taki,
think you're much better where you are.
in a funny way, we might be actually
Yeah,
in
actually, in a
Africa.
funny way, you might be. Yeah, yeah,
It's a funny situation we find ourselves in. But Taki, you mentioned it right at the beginning. Epstein.
yeah.
Has Trump dropped the ball on the investigation of Epstein? Is this what what is the
Well, first of
reason?
all, Trump.
Pam Bond,
First of all, Trump had nothing to do. They found a couple of pictures. He goes to parties. I could have been there. I've never met the son of a bitch, and I wouldn't even go near him because I knew all about him. Well, everybody knew. It's very simple. He blackmailed a very rich Jewish man, head of the family, obviously heterosexual, who had homosexual tendency, called Wexner. He is very well known. We had what's it called? The thing, the woman dressed very well. Anyway, he got money. How do you explain that this man who went to a bad high school and never graduated from a top university suddenly was given millions to run by a man called Black from Apollo and from Wexner? He obviously did sexual things with them or had them photographed, provided girls for them, and suddenly he has millions to play with and a private plane and all that. He was a blackmailing pimp, and Trump was never his type. Trump would never get into those situations. If you're at a party, somebody comes up, shakes your hand. Trump was a glad hander, real estate mogul from Queens. So they found a couple of pictures. Trump has nothing to worry about. They're trying to invent things. But Epstein got close to vulnerable, probably in the closet, men who were married, who were very rich. That was his trick. It's as simple as that.
yeah, I think if they had anything on Trump, you would have heard from
Oh,
the Biden. The
are
Biden,
you kidding? They're trying to find, they can't. There's nothing. Even if they were, look, at a party, you're not going to ruin the party or insult your host by saying, "What is this pimp blackmailer doing here?" Trump shakes hands with everybody. I shook hands with him once because I threatened the New York Times man to punch him in the mouth. I was seated at the Conrad Black party. I was seated on the left of Melania. Nobody, I mean, Trump was known as a real estate mogul. He had built the Trump Tower. I was seated next. He was doing the bombing of Serbia, and I had started the American Conservative. We were screaming against NATO bombing Serbia. I spoke to her a little. She wasn't very interested in, she's from Slovenia, which is next door. And this man kept interrupting. When I said to him, "Stop interrupting," his name was, I think, Joe Kraft. I said, "Otherwise, I'm going to be chewing on your gums." So she obviously told this to Trump, who came up to me and he said, "Taki, you're great." Shook my hand. That's the only time I ever saw him. We shook hands, and that was it. You know, so the idea that Trump had anything to do with Epstein is ridiculous, but they'll invent it, I guess. The more power he gets.
Nikki, do you think they're going to get anywhere with going after people like Comey and Brennan?
No,
I see.
no.
No.
They harassed him, but they didn't. They harassed him the way he's harassing him now. I don't think they'll get anywhere. But Comey, I just wrote a column about revenge. Comey, they acted badly. I mean, he was an ex-president, and they went after him. I know that woman who got 90 million. It's on appeal. I know the dressing rooms at Bergdorf Goodman because I went up there with my wife once. I mean, a midget couldn't make love in there, and she's claimed she was raped by this 6'4". Come on, I mean, it's common sense.
Okay, somebody with a little bit of a legal background, I think there's a major systemic problem with the justice system in America because these jury systems, these politically appointed prosecutors and judges, the whole
Yeah,
system is so twisted. I
so
don't
twisted
know where
because yeah,
anything can happen to you in America now if you're on.
Alvin Bragg, who went after Trump, he's black and he got 70% of the votes now because he comes from a district that's 100% black from Harlem. So of course he's going to do what he thinks will please his own people. I prefer the French system where they have the judges. I don't believe in juries as much as I believe in good professional lawyers. I prefer the French system much more than our system. I really do, because they're not elected. Because
Yeah.
when you're elected, you're going to have to give something back.
Yeah.
They're appointed, and they're not appointed by different governments. They're appointed by their own superior in their departments. I think it's a better system, but
Yeah, without a doubt. Turkey, what do you say about Sarkozy?
I
Does
think
he deserve
I
to be
think he
where he
shouldn't
is?
have gone in. It's I have a half sort of step sister they went. They yelled, "Sarkozy is not a crook. Sarkozy took money. Tell me a politician who hasn't taken money. It's political. I mean, I wasn't for Sarkozy. In fact, a cousin of my first wife broke Sarkozy's father's arm once in a fight. Sarkozy's father was a vulgar Hungarian Jewish. Sarkozy took money for the party. He was bling bling and all that, but I think he deserved better. An ex-president of the republic should not go to jail for money he took for the party. I mean, it should have been covered up the way they covered up everything else. But I didn't think it was France's finest hour.
Lucky, my little claim to fame with the French is I spent a bit of time with Giscard when he
Yes,
came hunting
wow, he was a big
back in the
womanizer.
80s.
Yeah,
He'd been hunting with Bokassa up
yes.
in Central Africa, and then he came down to Zambia. So I got to spend a bit of time with him. And I don't think he was above taking a few. Almost
Oh, he
certainly
took,
he got rich. He got a whole lot of diamonds and stuff
of
from old
course, no,
Bokassa.
no. Giscard was known for that, but the French protectors. I think the only two presidents in my time that were above board were, of course, De Gaulle and Pompidou. Pompidou was a wonderful president. I remember I was at a party once, and I was young. I was 22, 23, with a very pretty girl. And as we're going into dinner, he's president of the republic, and he said, "La jeunesse d'abord," first the youth. And I said, "Monsieur le Président, you've got to be kidding." I said it in English. Of course, you go first. He laughed and he went. But very charming man, very intelligent man. They were above. And of course, they mixed him up in a scandal saying his wife had done something with some other woman. I mean, once you're in politics, they'll invent anything. But the French, I don't know. I don't live there anymore. I lived there as a young man. The French, somehow, I like the way they protect the integrity of France. France is like and I think putting Sarkozy in jail was a bit of a mistake. But anyway, he'll be out soon. I think Macron should have pardoned him immediately. But anyway, it's like that joke that Macron's wife is a man, for God's sake. And poor children. Anyway.
Taki, actually, I'm going to be watching the rugby tonight. France are playing South Africa,
Oh, they
which is
are.
always a great game. I
Good
actually went
favor.
over
Good
for the
favor.
World Cup. It was absolutely wonderful being at the World Cup. The French did it beautifully. It's just nice to see how much they still enjoy their rugby.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
it
yeah.
was great fun. But Turkey, I'm taking up a lot of your time. I just want to finish off
No,
with
we'll finish off now. I want to tell you again.
Hemingway. I just want to ask you about Hemingway. Did you spend a bit of time with him?
No, I will tell you the best story of all, and then we'll call it a day.
Yeah.
I've read everything about him. I know everything about him. I've read everything he's ever written. I continue to write the greatest. And one day, I'm 15 years old. I'm down from boarding school. I'm walking on Fifth Avenue, and I see Hemingway in a thick tweed brown suit, barreling his way down, his arms swinging, and I follow him. He turns left on 54th Street and goes into El Borracho, means the drunk, a restaurant that my parents used to take me. I follow him in there, and of course, the people remember me because my parents used to take me there. El Borracho, every lady in those days, this is the 50s, every lady that wore lipstick back then would give an imprint of her lipstick and they would put it on the wall. So I walked in, he went to the bar. So, of course, I approached him. I said, Mr. Hemingway, I've read everything you've ever written. I'm a great fan. He said, sit down, sit down. I had 3 whiskey sours. And then I walked back to the Sherry Netherlands, which is on 59th and 5th Avenue, where my parents lived. We had an apartment which we had bought. He left. My mother, who I hate to say, had no idea who Hemingway was, called my father in the office and said, Taki's here and he's drunk. He's 15 years old. My father sort of laughed, put me on the telephone. I said, I've been with Hemingway. He said, it's all right. All right. The next day, I went to the tailor's and I ordered an itchy, horrible suit, just like Hemingway's, tight, thick. Guess what happened 3 days later? Front page of the New York Post. It wasn't Hemingway. It was one of those imposters with a white beard who pretends to be Hemingway.
Yeah.
For 3 days, I thought Hemingway and I were the best friends. Then I found, so I never met him. But I remember 6th of July, 1961, when he committed suicide. I've been writing about him ever since. My dear Hannes, I want to thank you for having me.
Thank you, Taki.
And you can have me. I'm like a hooker. You can have me anytime and give my best lady.
Taki, thank you so much. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Best of luck. Call me if you come to New York or come and stay with me in Gstaad. I'll be going to Gstaad for Christmas. Lots and lots
Taki, I'll stay in touch.
The best to your girls.
Thank you, man.
Cheers, thank you.
Cheers, man.
Bye.
Bye.